today, and certainly want to thank the press for showing up in big numbers. We certainly appreciate that. Want to make certain that our members get an opportunity. Our members for showing up today and making certain that we are unveiling our planned legislative agenda for the 2025 session. But before I begin my remarks, I would like to speak to some of the things that I've been seeing in the media from the federal level that's been very disappointing. While it's not my job or my role to really talk about the federal government and what's going on there, but I think it's extremely important that the citizens of Alabama not just lay down and allow the things that are happening at the federal level without saying anything. I've kind of waited for some time to see some engagement from the national level, but to my disappointment, there's not been a lot of activity and engagement. But to see some of the executive actions that have taken place is unconscionable. It's disheartening, and in some articles and some people I've talked to, it's scary. But I know that we've withstood the test of times before, and we can do it now, but we cannot do it by sitting down. And so there are issues that's very important to us, the issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really seeing the executive orders reminds me of some of the conversations that my grandmother used to have with me when she talked about in reference the 1960s and some of the things that went on. It's just in a different way. And so throughout the session, we will be, as things go on, we will be addressing that. We've given other parties an opportunity to address and push back on the extremism that we're seeing at the federal level, but we're not waiting any longer. We will be addressing those issues as they come head on, unapologetically. And so I just want to make certain that I brace the press for some of the activity that we're going to be engaging in this particular session and throughout the next 4 years. Thank you again for joining us for this very important announcement. Thank Neil Rafferty, the chair of our platform committee, and members of the platform committee, as well as Representative Adeline Clark, who's chair of the policy committee, and our chair for the Democratic Caucus, Representative Drummond, all for your leadership, and all the members that are standing here and those that are not. We certainly appreciate your input in forming this very robust agenda for the 2025 legislative session. That's titled Forward for Freedom. I'd like to also say to the press that we will be continuing to engage in our press conferences on Wednesday, starting next Wednesday. We will be engaging in press conferences every week, as we've done in the sessions before, at the same time at 1 o'clock. And members will be talking about some of our priorities, but we'll also be playing a little bit more defense this time, as we've played in the past, because the time has changed and the boldness have certainly changed. And so we will be addressing those issues, and certainly would like to have you guys present during those particular press conferences. The power of a declaration cannot be understated. Our nation's Declaration of Independence was the battle cry that propelled us forward to fight for our freedom. We began our unique experiment in democracy guided by the words of Thomas Jefferson, who wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We understand these powerful words to mean that the very purpose of a democratic self-government is to preserve, protect, and to expand our freedom. In Alabama, the same has been true since our humble beginnings in 1819. when we became the 22nd state of this great union and agreed to uphold the law and values enshrined in the United States Constitution. I think we can all agree that to be an American and to be an Alabamian means that you cherish and celebrate your freedom. But it also means that you understand that the concept of freedom, that its desperation and its limitations and abundant blessings have all been at the core of the greatest struggles, strife, and successes. I believe I speak for the entire caucus when I say that preserving, protecting, and expanding your freedom is our guiding principle. We understand how law can sometimes be a double-edged sword. It can either be a seemingly immovable obstacle to your unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or it can be the key to unlocking the door of the American dream. Therefore, our common purpose must be to foster the growth of freedom and to stand staunchly opposed to any efforts to diminish it, particularly when those efforts are purposely discriminatory. We also know that with freedom comes responsibility. That is why, as a legislator, we must take all consequences into account, whether they are purposeful or unintentional. That is how we fulfill the promise of our democracy and create a more perfect union through opportunity and growth. Your freedom and your future depends on an effective, responsible government that honors diversity, equity, and inclusion for all without fear or favor. We believe in a fair, transparent, and accountable government that respects personal liberty, ensures public safety, and helps every Alabama citizen pursue the American dream. For Alabama to thrive and prosper, we must work together toward a more common goal for freedom. We cannot go backwards. We will not let the obstacles of uncertainty, fear, or hate slow our progress or divide us. The only way to reach these goals is for all of us to stay united together by a common and uplifting purpose to march forward for freedom. I would now like to introduce a staunch, outspoken, and steadfast leader to our march to freedom, our Democratic Caucus Chair, Representative Barbara Drummond.
Good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon.
I want to make it really clear that the platform that we're unveiling today is one of which that is unanimous for our caucus. We realize that we're in a minority, and I see new faces out there with the media, so I thank you all for coming, and I want our members quickly so that you will know who they are, because they're in this fight. We're in this fight unanimously and together. So can you introduce yourselves just real quickly?
Yeah, I'm State Representative Jeremy Gray. I represent the 83rd District that covers Lee and Russell County.
I'm Representative Neil Rafferty with House District 54, Birmingham and Irondale and Jefferson County.
Tashina Mars, District 77, Montgomery County.
Adeline Clark, District 97, covering parts of Mobile, Chickasaw, and Saraland.
Representative Kelvin Lawrence, House District 69.
Representative Thomas Jackson, House District 68, Clark, Choctaw, Conecuh, Marengo, Monroe, Perry, and Wilcox, Southwest Alabama.
All the above.
Good afternoon. I am Penny McClammy, and I represent District 76, the capital city of Montgomery.
I'm A.J. McCampbell. I represent District 71 as parts of Tuscaloosa, Pickens, all of Sumter, and Marengo counties.
Representative Kenyatta Hassel. I represent District 78 right here in Montgomery.
Good afternoon. Philip Ensler, represent District 74 right here in Montgomery as well.
As you can see, this is our caucus, which is working vigorously Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Hall. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Representative Laura Hall, House District 19, Madison County.
This is a caucus that is working very vigorously to push our Forward for Freedom platform. So if you get no other name but Forward for Freedom, that is what we're standing for in 2025 in this session. I want to thank Leader Daniels because he's been such an awesome minority leader, and thanks to all of our members who share the priorities of the people of their district as we craft our Forward for Freedom legislative platform. As Leader Daniels so eloquently, and if I must say so Martin Luther King style, mentioned, we're committed to moving Alabama forward through wise and practical policies that improve the quality of life, not for some, but for all of us. As we all know, one of the major after effects of COVID-19 pandemic was the rising cost of living to global supply chain shortages, inflation, and corporate profiteering. Although significant progress has been made in curbing inflation, prices seem to remain high, and almost on everything, whether it's eggs, the rent, or your winter electric bill. That's why we strongly support increasing economic opportunities. It's one of our highest priorities for workers and their families, as well as the employers throughout the state of Alabama. That's why Democrats, we're supporting an economic environment that benefits hardworking Alabamians like you. That means increasing investment in child care, transportation, and housing for you and your family and for the community. We strongly believe in empowering new businesses to prosper by increasing access to capital and creating a pro-growth and profitable business environment that fosters innovation. Also, we believe that the workplace safety should be a top priority. For us to move forward for freedom, that means having economic freedom to pursue your dreams and goals. But we also understand, as Gandhi once said, it is health that is the real wealth, not pieces of gold and silver. That is why we firmly believe that everyone should have access to affordable health care. That means we need to close the coverage gap, eliminate health care deserts, and stop hospital closures in Alabama. Yes. We support increasing preventive care, mental health, and substance abuse services. We must improve maternal and infant care. We also strongly believe that we must protect public health, especially today, by ensuring clean drinking water, upgrading sewage and water systems, and promoting sustainable environmental policy. We will continue to advocate for the expansion of Medicaid and do everything that we can to increase access to health care, because that's how you move freedom forward. Now I would like to turn it over to our noted colleague, Representative Tashina Morris. Again, we thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Rep. Drummond. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
One of the great men in Alabama history, Dr. George Washington Carver, once said, "Education is the key that unlocks the golden door to freedom." Therefore, to move forward for freedom and to enjoy the blessings of liberty, it is vital to have a quality education. We believe that investing in public education expands opportunities for future generations. We must improve Alabama's scholastic achievement and high school graduation rates. We support increasing pay for educators and ensuring they have the resources and support they need to help children succeed. I repeat, we support increasing pay for educators and ensuring they have the resources and support they need to help children succeed. We must prioritize school safety, violence prevention, and anti-bullying policies. We are glad that conversations have begun to address our state school funding model, but we must support a model in which funds and opportunities are distributed in an equitable manner that does not leave any of our children behind. Last year, we were excited to see legislation passed that allowed for the creation of the Alabama School of Healthcare Sciences in Demopolis. This career-focused school will provide free healthcare education to enroll high school students and put them on a track for successful careers in the healthcare industry. Currently, there are already 3 other specialty schools across the state focusing on fine arts, math, and science, and cyber technology and engineering. This is the type of forward-thinking and innovative approach to public education that we should expand in Alabama. Now is not the time to subsidize private education with public dollars, nor should we be injecting politics into our public education classrooms. The quality of our public schools should not be dependent on your zip code. For us to move forward for freedom, we must ensure that all of our children have the education and training they need to achieve the prosperity they seek and deserve. Thank you. I would now like to introduce the chair of our policy committee, Representative Adeline Clark.
Thank you, Representative Morris, and good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
As my colleagues have noted, wealth, health, and a quality education are fundamental in our quest to move forward for freedom. Yet there is only one way that we can ensure our economic prosperity, our access to affordable care, and our collective need for excellence in public education, and that is to vote and to maximize voting turnout in our state. I say this because every other right and freedom that we enjoy today is predicated on that fundamental right to vote. Yet so many of our citizens do not participate and think that their vote just doesn't matter. You see, your vote is vital to our collective progress, and it's how we ensure that the blessings of freedom and equal opportunity are available to all of us. Of all of our rights, the right to vote is the most powerful because all of our other rights depend on it. To put this in better perspective, in Alabama, only 37.3% of eligible voters turned out to vote for the 2022 midterm elections, the 5th worst turnout in the United States. During the last presidential election, turnout in Alabama was only 58.5%, an improvement, but that still means that roughly 4 out of 10 Alabamians chose to stay at home or thought that their vote would have no impact. As you can see, this is a problem that affects everyone, regardless of which party you support. To be clear, we believe in maximizing voter turnout because every citizen deserves to have their voice heard. That's why we must do everything in our power to increase voter participation and oppose unnecessary obstacles to voting like voter suppression and gerrymandering. We must make it easier for people with disabilities, the elderly, and those with special needs to be able to cast their ballots without hindrance, restraint, or fear. Furthermore, we must stop the spread of misinformation relating to the security and integrity of our elections. That includes protecting our election workers from harassment and threats of violence. We must always remember that your vote is your voice, and your voice matters because that is how you move forward for freedom. Freedom that honors diversity, cherishes inclusion, and demands equity so that we may all prosper, thrive, and flourish. Freedom to pursue your dreams and ambitions while solemnly recognizing your responsibility to create a better America and Alabama for generations to come. Exercising your sacred right to vote is the power that maximizes your freedom and makes a better future for you and your family possible. I thank you for listening, and I would like to introduce the illustrious chair of our platform committee, my colleague, Representative Neil Rafferty.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Adeline. So, as we discuss what it means to move forward for freedom, I'm reminded of the words of A. Philip Randolph, a civil rights activist who started the first African American labor union. Freedom is never granted, it is won. Justice is never given, it is exacted. What I take from this quote is the fact that freedom and justice must coexist for us to enjoy the full extent of our rights and responsibilities afforded to our American way of life. It is the same concept that the author and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl noted when he said, "The Statue of Liberty should be supplemented by the Statue of Responsibility." I mention this because in order for us to move forward for freedom, we must also guarantee that our justice system is not only fair, but humane. We must balance our desire for freedom with our solemn responsibility to protect the freedoms of others. In Alabama, we see this conflict play out as we see the scourge of gun violence in our streets. Today, I'm here to say that it's time to put the political rhetoric aside and to take meaningful steps to solve the problem before us. We can do that without infringing upon the rights of gun owners, while at the same time recognizing our responsibility to ensure that our children can go to school, that our seniors can go to the grocery store without fear of violence and death. That is why we must repeal the permitless carry, concealed carry, and address the rampant gun violence which has become the leading cause of death for Alabama children. I believe that we all want a fair and humane justice system, one that works not just to punish those who break the law, but to meaningfully rehabilitate and successfully reintegrate them back into society when their sentences are complete. It's why we strongly support reforming Alabama's prisons and transforming the pardons and paroles process. It's why we must transform our corrections facilities and do everything we can to stop the human rights violations and corruption within that system. That includes ensuring fair sentences for nonviolent crimes so that prisons don't become overcrowded and violent facilities that exist simply to warehouse people. We've talked a lot today about the importance of moving forward for freedom. And we often use these words, for freedom and liberty, interchangeably. But there is a difference. Freedom is often described generally as self-determination and the pursuit of happiness, whereas liberty may be best defined as a state of being free without interference from the government or other institutions. I say this because a critical plank in our platform this year is what we call the Choose Liberty plank. Under the Choose Liberty plank, we declare our staunch support for the repeal of Alabama's total abortion ban that has no exceptions for rape or incest, because we must get government out of family planning. We must also believe in decriminalizing recreational marijuana and improving the medical marijuana licensing process. Lastly, we must repeal bans on DEI and end systemic discrimination. As Michelle Alexander said in the new Jim Crow, we should not hope for a colorblind society, but instead for a world in which we can see each other fully, learn from each other, and do what we can to respond to each other with love. That was King's dream, a society that is capable of seeing each of us as we are with love. This is a goal worth fighting for. And I'll close by saying this: Alabama cannot afford to go backwards. It's time for us to pull together, move forward, and solve the problems we have before us. We are excited to begin this legislative session, to work on finding common ground without sacrificing the principles we hold so dear, and to move forward together, forward for freedom. Thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Representative, the other caucus, the Republican caucus, and I think the governor is proposing public safety measures, including supporting a ban on Glock switches, which has been introduced. Is that enough, or does the state need to do further in addressing gun violence?
I will let Phil, and you want to come up here and answer that one?
So Philip, you can address the Glock switch, and then we want to make certain that we take them separately and not box everything in so that no one's confused. So you go ahead and address it.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just briefly say, I mean, it's, the Glock switches ban is one of a large puzzle, and it starts with reaching our young people, it starts with conflict resolution, starts with working, to address all the systemic issues, all the inequities that may contribute towards gun violence. The Glock switch ban is just one of many different things that we can do. Echo, of course, what was said by the caucus, that the repeal, if the permit was carried, was incredibly dangerous, and we hear all from law enforcement, how dangerous that is.
And then another one of our colleagues have a gun bill, Representative Hassel.
I have HB 23 that would require, for semi-automatic weapons, require permits in the state of Alabama to get our police officers some type of authority to check and see if they have a permit to carry that particular weapon on the semi-auto weapon. So that's another piece, I believe, that will help the public safety here in Alabama.
Is that handgun and long gun?
Yes. Well, another aspect of the bill too is we're going to also look at the population in Alabama. So it's affected in our heavily populated areas. So we're going to allow those requirements to come to areas like, Montgomery, Mobile, we could say just our heavily populated areas where these permits will be used for the state, in those heavily populated areas.
We're also going to look at another bill which I filed today. When we talk about our children going to school with school safety, we're calling it the accountability bill. I filed it today, which would require all of those weapons that are in homes, parents and guardians, to lock them up. It will not violate anybody's Second Amendment right. Actually, we've been working with the other side. Because we don't look at this as a gun bill, we look at it as a responsibility bill, making them responsible. So that bill is being filed today. So, because I know you all have seen all of the shootings on all of the school campuses, and we don't say if it will happen in Alabama, we say when it happens in Alabama. So we're trying to make parents and those that are guardians of those young people that those guns don't show up on school campuses.
Can we get each speaker, if you will, to step to the mic and speak into the microphone so we can hear?
Yes.
I think from a broader perspective, we also have to look at providing funding to a lot of these municipalities for drones, because we're beginning to see that there's been uses of drones across the country to help law enforcement, because they're so understaffed, help law enforcement see and assess what's going on the ground before they get to the scene of the crime, or even responding to a call. And so it kind of puts some eyes on what the situation is prior to law enforcement getting there. And then that way communities will be able to effectively use the resource of the men and women that they have on the front lines and in law enforcement a lot more effectively. Yes.
For years, and even this year, I know your caucus has been heavily in watching what's done in terms of healthcare around this state, from the metropolitan areas to rural areas. Is that still at the top of your list of wanting to see some work done to improve it throughout the state?
Absolutely. That's always been on our caucus agenda for some time. Expansion is a high priority for us. We know that there are pieces of legislation that's going to be introduced that deals with some of the closing the healthcare gap, and we're assessing those pieces of legislation, one on which we're more partial to than the others, but we're open to whatever solves the problem in the state of Alabama.
Did you want to go? Just a more general question, just to step back. Go ahead and compare and contrast kind of this platform versus what you've done in the past. Has it been more conservative, more ambitious? And kind of what has the political environment contributed? How has the political environment contributed to this platform?
And so things that are been on our agenda, that's been on there for some time, stays on the agenda until it's done. as things leave our agenda, we add other additional things, priorities. We do an assessment of the state to figure out what issues, to solve various problems. And that's how we come up with adding certain things to our platform. But we've really had the general basis of our platform since the beginning, since 2017.
What are the main issues that you're finding now in Alabama that is you need to address given with the platform?
So healthcare and employment. I think last year we talked about, we've been talking for years about childcare. We were able to finally get a bill to address childcare. We're looking at other options. I was on a panel this morning for the Forestry Association, and we talked about, although we've moved from 56 to 58% unemployment, there's still a large unemployment folks out there, but there are more jobs than there are people. And then looking at how does AI impact that? The type of jobs and the type of careers that our young people need to go into. And so from an AI standpoint, with the federal level looking at making significant investments in AI, and companies are already integrating AI into a lot of their systems for efficiency, we got to figure out how to create an opportunity for coders. We got to do coding in elementary schools. We got to make certain that we double down on that, middle school as well, and so that we're preparing them for the jobs of the future to support some of the AI that will likely be implemented aggressively within the next 4 years.
And healthcare, you mentioned healthcare too.
And healthcare has always been a priority. You see the hospital closures across the state of Alabama. There are hospitals right now that's really barely able to make payroll. That's within our state. Some have had to have a reduction in force in order to keep their doors open and make some adjustments to their status from a federal standpoint, so they can draw down on more federal dollars. And then some of them are just completely offline, and others are right now going to their local government, county commissions, and looking at opportunities like local tax referendums. And so what we're trying to do is speaking to the urgency of expanding Medicaid and closing the gap for healthcare gap in the state of Alabama, so that those people in those communities will be able to have care and will be able to keep their hospitals open.
And one of the other issues that I know I'll be addressing, and my colleagues in rural Alabama will be addressing, is the ability of having ambulance services in our counties. Ambulance services is a real challenge in all the counties right now. We're having these counties that do not have hospitals, they are also not able to get ambulance services in these counties as well. So that has been a real issue in rural Alabama, and it'll be one that I'll be addressing along with the rural caucus, because that's not a West Alabama or South Alabama, East or North Alabama issue. It's actually a rural Alabama issue, but I imagine it could also be a part of an issue in urban America also.
So Representative Morris had said that now is not the time to inject public tax dollars into private schools. So I was wondering if there's any efforts this session to perhaps repeal or even amend the CHOOSE Act.
There'll be a surprise. I can't talk about it right now. But there will be a surprise coming within the next couple of weeks. And to address your issue about the platform, we've been really focusing on the issues that impact Alabama, and some of the issues that are in dire need that needs to focus in Alabama at the federal, national level are not necessarily priorities to them. And so we're only prioritizing things that are impacting the communities and the people that we represent. We don't have a cookie-cutter approach to it. We are focusing based upon data and what's going on in our local community and how it's impacting it. And so we don't get our instructions and our platform from the national level. We focus and come up with a platform based upon the needs of the state. And so we don't really engage in whatever's going on at the federal level from a Democratic Party standpoint. There are issues that they prioritize, but we prioritize the issues that directly impact people within the state of Alabama. Oh, that begs some other questions.
Which one? You just wanted two people. Oh, okay. Earlier you talked about playing defense, obviously, with the the shakeup that happened in November nationally. The pieces of legislation that I've seen filed currently in the state on the other side of the aisle, it hasn't reflected, I guess, the confidence of people who feel like they won the White House and won the Senate. What defense are you anticipating having to play coming from them as we move into session?
Well, as the noise get louder, the people in the state of Alabama start to hear it. And a lot of legislation, the pressure from constituents, from a party standpoint, sometimes become a focus of that particular representative or senator. And so I anticipate pieces of legislation that deals with immigration and other issues coming up. I've heard the conversations, and so we'll be looking at any piece of legislation that's coming from the federal. That's the noise from the federal level is impacting in the state level, and I don't know exactly. I can't tell you exactly what that's going to be, but I anticipate to play some extreme defense based upon the conversations I've heard this weekend and conversations I've heard over the last couple of weeks. Yes.
We're looking forward to NAEP scores coming out tomorrow, National Assessment of Education Progress. Investments in education, would that include, would y'all be supporting investments in Literacy Act and Numeracy Act, specifically on math and science?
Absolutely, and I think Representative Drummond, I'll let you kind of address that particular issue, but yes.
Well, if you look in the past, we have supported both of those initiatives. But when you look at the NAEP scores, we're interested in looking at them because we're working on right now changing the formula for funding education, going to a more of a student-based formula. And as we know, the devil's always in the detail. We have not seen legislation. But if that legislation is going to go into Demopolis or into Clark County or into those very hard-to-fill schools where that student needs something, it certainly is going to be something that we're going to give a lot of look at. But we have attended, I think Representative Lawrence and Representative Daniels and I are both on ETF, and we've been working on this since May. So that is one thing that we're looking at very strongly, because when you talk about the Choose Act, we're sort of tired of all the time we're looking at things and it's taking away from public education and not going to that student and that student specific needs. So we're excited. At our last meeting, most of the members talked about a hybrid model where we sort of phase ourselves into this new student-based formula. So we're really excited about that. We have money because when the federal dollars came into Alabama, we put away some of that money. So we're going to be able to do a hybrid model that we can sort of start funding some of those very, very needed areas and then work our way out of the foundation program. So that is something that I think is very, very important to the state of Alabama. And I think as a caucus, we always look at education issues. They should not be political. All of our kids should be progressing. And when you look at those scores when they come out, I know for me, I'm always somewhat saddened because right now the money is not going to the student who needs it the most. So we're looking at changing that formula.
And I would also follow up on, we do believe with the chart of the Choose Act, we want to make certain that there are some guardrails on it for some accountability, to make certain that if we're making investments in an area, we need to understand the outcomes. And if the outcomes are working for them, then that gives, from a public education standpoint, us an opportunity to look at making some adjustments to accommodate some of our education, what we're doing in education, to get to the point to where we're focusing more on outcomes. But there's no state that I can point to, Todd, that has implemented a Choose Act type of program that have seen significant gains in academic performance.
And if you look at, we understand that the application period opened not very long ago. We're interested in looking at the data to make sure that those dollars, because we suspect that those dollars are going to folks who already have their children in private schools. So how is that helping the average public school student out there? So we're interested in looking at those applications and see where they're coming from, because You know, in rural areas, and I'm in a rural and an urban area, and in some of those schools that you will see that probably won't receive a favorable report card, they can't afford to go to a private school and be able to participate as a whole student. If that kid wants to go into academic, they don't have a parent that has the wherewithal financially to be able to fill that gap. So we're interested in looking at the data of those applications and making sure, again, that they're going to students who need the money.
I want to say a couple of things as relates to education in this state. There's been a war on public education for several decades, and you both know that. And what we've heard even from Lieutenant Governor, that we're going to privatize education in the state of Alabama. Now, I came through Jim Crow. I'm probably the only person here that came through separate but equal educations, two school systems. And so it looked like we're trying to go back instead of going forward together. And this Choose Act is what it's doing. It's going to take money from the schools that need it the most and take it to a private entity in the state. And then they choose who comes. And what happened to the school that's being left out? What happened to those children that has no choice? So this is where we are. And as Dr. King has said, there's some difficult days ahead, but we've had to come together to plan a solution forward to make Alabama in education, number one. And two, we got to move the obstacles that's been blocking our view and help us that we can elevate this state to a level that we can be looked upon as progressive rather than down as a state that you don't want to be a participant of. When you leave this state and people talk to me, you from Alabama, what's wrong with you? What's happening there? Just about now what's happening in the nation is what's going on here. This week, last week has been one of the terrible weeks for the state and the nation. All these executive orders taking away progress that's been made over the last 3 or 4 decades. And I'm finished, but this is where we are. We got to move the obstacles, take the blinders off, and look at each other as who we are, people, not as skin color. Thank you.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, Minority Leader, but the House Republicans' Alabama Values Agenda, is there anything in that raises concern for you or any other Democratic Party members?
You know, sometimes there are things that are thrown, there are carrots out there to make you kind of, I just don't see any legislation. I'll wait to see the legislation, as I mentioned before, is based upon that particular platform. It really didn't tell me a whole lot. And so I'll wait to see the legislation. So that, as I mentioned, the devil's in the details. And right now I didn't really see a whole lot of teeth inside of what was presented, what I read on Yellowhammer yesterday. I didn't really see a whole lot of teeth, so I'll be waiting to see exactly what their focus is. I looked at the immigration. Let me say this about immigration. If we, as a state, have a high unemployment rate in the state of Alabama, if you start focusing on deportations and other things, then who are you going to have left to work in certain areas, in certain jobs? The hospitality industry and other industries where individuals that have come to the state to provide get an opportunity for them and their families. And so I think that one of the things that we have to look at is we have to look at the risk versus the reward. And as I mentioned before, we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to kind of the federal, what they're doing on the federal level, but when it impacts the state, we do. And right now, the immigration issue will be impacting our state, and I hope that my colleagues on the other side don't introduce legislation to reflect the federal, the executive orders, to try to appeal from a national standpoint. Hopefully, I haven't seen any pieces of legislation that speaks to that, but I'll wait to see kind of what happens. So I wouldn't want to go into detail go on the attack until I really see exactly what's going to be introduced.
Do you mean the unemployment or the?
Let me get with him and then I'll talk to you.
Yeah, going to the Republican agenda again, comparing it to y'all's, there is some overlap with investing in public education, also job creation. Is there any common ground that can be reached this session on those two topics, aside from the modernizing of public education funding?
Well, I think that last year's agenda is going to hurt the funding for this year's agenda. When you talk about the Choose Act, and you're talking about $100 million now, and then the cap comes off. And so what is it going to be another 2 years from now? And so it's interesting to talk about being supportive of public education close to qualifying in June, or in May, during an election year. But the actions last year certainly didn't tell me that there was an excitement about public education. So you can tell me something, but your actions is what I'm going to go by. So I'm not going to fall for the, as we say in my community, okey-doke.
As far as job creation, any ideas on the platform that you all have for job creation?
Well, from a job creation standpoint, as I mentioned about AI, and I have colleagues that serve on the AI task force, and so there will be legislation brought or recommendations brought about AI. I think that we have to shift our focus on workforce development and workforce training to be reflective of where the investments are going, the private investments and the public federal investments that are going. So right now, there are tariffs being put on certain countries. And so I know that there's a shift for U.S. investors as well as Chinese investors to go into Southeast Asian countries. So therefore, they're shifting the manufacturing focus into other countries that don't have the tariffs. And so looking at the jobs that will be created, or the things that we'll need to do here is going to depend upon where those investments are going. Because if the manufacturing investments are going in these areas, and depending on how much those investments are, then it's going to be impossible for us to have a real manufacturing presence outside of the presence that we have in the areas that we're focusing on. I would suspect that medical supplies, a lot of product development will be in those Southeast Asian countries because of where the private investments are going. And so for us, I think that AI, we have to double down on the AI from the elementary school all the way up through higher education. All right, this will be the last question.
Mr. Leader, I know several people have said in between sessions and now that there's not much of an appetite this session about gaming and gambling. Now, it was something that a lot of people have talked about across this state for years, and are still asking, when are we going to get a chance or ourselves to talk about it and vote? You didn't mention it in your plans as of right now, but if it was to come up, are you and your caucus ready to react to it in case it does?
Here's how I'll respond to you, Randy. We had it on our platform last time, and we pushed it out of the House. It remains in the Senate, and that's where it died. And so until the Senate decides that they want to prioritize it, we're not going to even think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.